final form of the warrior is Christ. I've been getting a lot of interesting reflections lately. As you know, I've launched the community, which you should be a part of, Sons of God. The link is in the description and in the pinned comments. And I'm attracting, I'm magnetizing all of these different reflections of myself. The further you go on this journey, the more you realize that the people you attract are aspects of yourself. And so, with every guy that comes to the community, every one of these kings, I'm engaging with them on the basis of realizing that they are showing me some element of myself that I'm not fully aware of yet. I have something to learn from every one of these kings. Every single one of us has something to learn from each other. We're all reflecting back different facets of the diamond. Now, one of the brothers was talking about how he has trouble accepting Christ. And he said it's to do with his meekness. We've got this idea, especially if you've been raised in a religious family or gone to a school with religion, and you've been implanted with some of these ideas. We've got this concept of Jesus that he was just the ultimate nice guy. And I get the feeling that this has done a lot of damage to masculinity, this false notion of who Christ was. And I fully understand, I fully am aware of why, this brother sees things like that and has trouble accepting, embodying this Christ archetype, because it's perceived as weak, soft, nice, not having a backbone, all of these different adjectives, ideas. But the truth is very, very much deeper than that. And I want to just unpack that a bit for myself, for you guys, because as we keep walking this path of ascension, we're going to come closer and closer to this energy of Christ, this archetype of Christ. Christ just means anointed of God, chosen by God to fulfill God's purpose. And we are getting more and more familiar with this Christ essence every day that we walk this journey. So I want to unpack some of this stuff here. I want to go to the second book of Samuel, and we're reading chapter 23. Now, in this chapter, we're looking at a group of men known as David's mighty men. And I'm going to give you this reading, this chapter, which describes what these men were like. These were the men chosen by the king to be his elite warriors because they possessed the Spirit of the Lord in spades. Anytime you hear about the Spirit of the Lord in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, you're getting a reference to the Spirit of Christ, the essence of Christ. The expression of God through the human personality. That's what Christ is. The expression of God through the human soul, It's taking this abstract idea of God and expressing it through the human experience. Christ was the Son of Man and the Son of God. So the Lord being Christ, is a much more relatable image of God than just the Father God, this abstract notion, or I am. That's the power of whenever you read the Lord or the Spirit of the Lord, you're knowing that they're talking about Christ. Okay, so listen to this description of these mighty men who possessed the Spirit of the Lord. Thus says David, the son of Jesse. Thus says the man raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me, and his word was on my tongue. The God of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spoke to me. He who rules over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. And he shall be like the light of the morning when the sun rises, a morning without clouds, like the tender grass springing out of the earth by clear shining after the rain. Although my house is not so with God, yet he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For this is my salvation and all my desire. Will he not make it increase? But the sons of rebellion, the black magicians, shall all be as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man who touches them must be armed with iron and the shaft of a spear, and they shall be utterly burned with fire in their place. So those were the last words of David. Then it goes into this description of the mighty men. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb-Basshebeth, the Tachmonite, chief among the captains. He was called Adino the Eznite because he had killed 800 men at one time. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the 3 mighty men with David, when they defied the Philistines, who were gathered there for battle. And the men of Israel had retreated. He, Eleazar, arose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand stuck to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to plunder. And after him was Shammah, the son of Agi the Hararite. The Philistines had gathered together into a troop where there was a piece of ground full of lentils. So the people fled from the Philistines, but he stationed himself in the middle of the field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Then 3 of the 30 chief men went down at harvest time and came to David at the cave of Adullam. And the troop of Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of the water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate, So the three mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. And he said, Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is this not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the three mighty men. Now, Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of another three. He lifted his spear against 300 men, killed them, and won a name among these three. 300 men, one man. Was he not the most honored of three? Therefore he became their captain. However, he did not attain to the first three. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion, just casually, in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. And he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, so he went down to him with a staff, wrestled the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada did, and won a name among 3 mighty men. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not attain to the first 3, and David appointed him over his guard. And it just goes on, talking about the deeds of these mighty men. Now, David is a reference, King David is a reference to Christ. He's a pre-incarnate foreshadowing, an archetype of Christ. And it could be fairly concluded that he was the greatest archetype of the coming Christ. He was known as the Son of the Lord. So, if David was the leader of these mighty men, and David possessed the Spirit of the Lord, or the Spirit of the Lord came upon David at many times during his life, beginning with the moment he was anointed by Samuel, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Then what we're seeing in King David, who was a mighty warrior who led a group of mighty warriors who were known to kill 800 men, 300 men each, who achieved impossible feats. There's another story of another one of these mighty men who he slayed enemies all day, killing people. And at the end of the day, his hand was so tightly gripped around his sword that he couldn't let it go. His hand was just glued to his sword. Gives you a bit of a visual. Now, you might be wondering why I'm reading you these Bible stories. Well, because the whole Bible is an archetype. The whole Bible is symbolism. It's a psychological drama, as Neville Goddard tells us. So it is absolutely packed with deep symbols of the unconscious, which is another way of saying of the soul. All the journeys that these people go on in the Bible are journeys that the soul goes on. It's a psychological drama. So if David was the pre-incarnate form of Christ, the highest level symbol of Christ, the coming Christ who appears in the New Testament, then we should look at David to get an insight into Christ, who he was. David was a slayer. He was a warrior. He started his career by taking down a 9-foot giant with a sling. He took down a 9-foot man who was coated in heavy armor with a smooth stone shot into his forehead. Then we have other symbols like the 3 angels of the Lord who went down to Sodom and Gomorrah and absolutely obliterated that place. These were representations of Christ as the judge, as the bringer of justice. I want you to get that these are all aspects of the highest level masculine soul. This is the background, this is the context leading into the revelation of Christ in the New Testament. I want to read you this Jordan Peterson quote, which is quite on topic. You've probably heard it. A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. So, when you think of Christ, you've got to do away with this notion that he was a pushover. Because everything leading up to him was kind of like the build-up, the rising music leading to the crescendo to reveal the highest form. The highest form was the self-sacrificing Christ, who didn't hold back on exercising violence because he couldn't. It's said that if he wanted to, he could have called down, this is in the Bible, when he was on the cross, he could have called down 10 legions of angels and annihilated the Roman army. But he didn't. He voluntarily went through the deepest level of suffering. I hope you can get an idea of the level of strength embodied by this man. He could have annihilated everyone. As you keep walking this path, you're tapping into deeper reservoirs of masculinity than you've ever known. That's what I'm getting at here. You're tapping into deeper levels of power than you have ever known. And you have an inner failsafe built in. It's called your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind tends to not allow you to be aware of your power until it believes that you're going to use it well, you're going to use it responsibly. Because you have a sense of morality built into your unconscious. It's part of your soul. It's part of your God spark, your God essence. But you can choose to override that. You can choose to get pulled down the dark path, the left-hand path, the path that Anakin Skywalker got pulled down because he was living in fear of loss. He was attached to this object, his wife, his sweetheart. He was attached to her on the level of putting her in front of God, putting her above God, putting her above good, righteousness. So he was willing to hurt many people to keep her alive, which she never would have wanted. But that's the path that he went down. He used his God essence, his power, the force, for ill, for darkness, for evil. I want you to become so aware now that you are gathering power. And again, if your unconscious mind senses that you're not ready for it, it's going to sabotage you by having you act out on lust, go back to the corn, go back to the fantasies, and waste the energy if it feels that you're not ready for it. This is actually God working through your unconscious, your soul. Because God is you. God is an unknown aspect of you that you haven't tapped into yet. And this is why we live in righteousness to the best of our ability, because as we live in righteousness, we're showing ourselves. We can't lie to ourselves. We can't lie to God, this part of ourselves. It sees everything we do. Just this afternoon, I told someone that I needed to borrow some butter, and I'd give them some more when I went to the shop. And I took that butter. I was in the shop this afternoon, and I didn't have as much cash as I thought I needed on me, so I bought a small packet of butter. Meanwhile, I was buying all the rest of the stuff that I needed for me. But as I was walking out of the shop, I was like, hang on a second. You're out of integrity right now. You're not keeping your word. You're not acting in full integrity. And that is going to weaken you as a man, because you are showing yourself that you can't be fully trusted. And if you show yourself that aspect of you, which is God, is going to hold back on giving you the full measure of power, because it knows. You know you can't be trusted with it. This is why we do God mode. This is why we purge ourselves of lust. This is why we start to become so sensitive and acutely aware of the smallest things, the smallest details. These matter now. You can't brush over these anymore, because you're stepping into the Christ archetype. You're not going to gain access to that level of power where you can call down legions of angels, where you can read people's minds, where you can know the most intimate details about people's lives and use that against them if you so choose. But that's not Christ. Christ is the embodiment of love. So you need to reach the point where you have full access to that power, but you're not going to abuse it. That is the pinnacle of masculinity. So start exercising your convictions. You already know what's right. You know which parts of your life are out of alignment. You know which aspects of anything you're doing right now in any area of your life, you know what's out of balance, what's not quite right. And you'll brush it aside, you ignore it, but the further you go along this path, the more your aura starts to expand, the more these little things are going to start to bother you. And if you ignore them, that's going to accumulate, that's going to build up. And because you're still rising in energy, that energy has to be channeled into something. And if it's not channeled into the highest good, it's going to get channeled into the path of darkness. So I don't know where that came from. I do. It came from you know where. That message had to come through for me and for you. Love you guys. Stay strong.